Hi. So this is a video that this is going to be the first of maybe a series of videos that I'm making in response to Ian Cattanach's channel, Right Conscious. I was getting prepared to leave our house and the country. My husband and I have decided that we are going to live in Europe. And in the fall, we got married, and then we sold our house, and then we went to live on a sailboat for a time that we had bought, and now we are in the final stages of becoming expats officially. And I switched my YouTube content up because I had never really watched BookTube. I didn't know what this book talk was. I am a published author. So if you watch the rest of my channel, it's not always me. I don't always make that clear because I'm so used to having to do other things to support myself that I very rarely foreground that about myself. But my name is Penelope Crystalfink. This is a pen name I give to myself. There is a whole video about my reasons for doing so on this channel. Welcome. And let's talk more about why I started self-publishing and why I'm so enthused about what Ian Cattanach is doing with his channel. So I normally was watching just news and politics and was in a rut. You know, when you get in a content rut, and I was going about the house, and I like to listen to YouTube in the background while I do other things, and I discovered Right Conscious, and I was like, what is this? There is a literary renaissance? I was like, who is this kid? Sorry, Ian. I call everyone who's younger than me kid. But I was like, this kid, I guess he's in Arizona or New Mexico or somewhere. He's talking about he started a literary renaissance. And I was like, what? I was like, where is what? I want to be a part of this. and then I started watching a lot of his content while packing and sorting and cleaning out the kitchen and whatnot. And I was like, wow, he likes to read all of the books that my ex-husband read, but somehow I can tolerate him. And so, no, he's a very inspiring and spirited individual, and I was very grateful to come across it. Now, some of his points about writing, I'm like, I don't know about that, Ian. I mean, I did have to adopt a pen name. And in terms of why I write, Ian has this thing about what he considers transformative literature. This is a very important adjective that he uses again and again to talk about the qualitative differences between what is mass marketed literature these days and what we associate in the liberal arts with classics or the canon. I'm just realizing now you're just going to have to hear the coffee pot. It's a small coffee pot. It will stop in a moment. I'm sorry. Okay, so transformative literature, the greats. I discovered there's this whole vein of YouTube content creators who are very devoted and motivated readers. And it was like, oh, I mean, I haven't been in an environment like this since I went to college. So it was very refreshing to me. But as an author, I just have to giggle a lot when I hear him talk about transformative literature because fundamentally, if you ask me why do you write? Why do you write? Why do you do that? Why do you spend this much time? I mean, the fundamental reason is it's fun. I like to do it. I get a lot of pleasure out of doing it. It's fun. I write because it's fun. And I think it's probably that way for most successful authors, those who we associate with great, profound works of art. Probably at the time that they were writing it, I can imagine because it's so much work and so much time, so much concentration. It's a burden of concentration to return to it again and again and again, and to work on that one story. But I mean, if I were to tell you why I write, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know that I could have an answer that satisfies or fits in with the ethos and the intent of the literary renaissance. I'm excited to watch this 2026 literary renaissance goals video that I saw of his on Substack. So, um, because I'm writing my 2026 goals. And it is a goal for me within the next 10 years to really blow up as an author, but I'm very ambivalent about it. I'm very apprehensive. I'm like, if I do make money from it, and if I am successful and I do become famous, will it be what will change about the fun factor? And the fun factor is a little bit deeper than that, and I'll elaborate. I have in other videos elaborated on the mental processes that happen to me when I write. I also am interested in health coaching because I'm a psychiatric survivor, and I've always been interested in alternative health and wellness, the wellness sphere. I worked for health food stores for a decade of my life, off and on, and did yoga a lot. And it's been part of a big part of my life is looking at health, fitness. I was a personal trainer for 3 years. So I mean, the thing about writing is I've always had to do something else for money. And because I always wanted to be a famous writer since I was a little girl, at various points in my life, there's been more or less resentment about that fact. And now that I'm in a place where, because I recently married somebody who's willing to support me, I have realized at the age of 44 a dream about time and about being free of the 9 to 5 grind. And so I have so many feelings, I'm just a font of feelings on a daily basis about this. Mixed feelings mostly, because, I always did have to do something else with my mind, and I was grateful for that. I actually dropped out of an MFA program. That is going to have to be a whole other video. More or less, there was a dilemma. I was sexually assaulted by a man that I was living in an apartment with less than a week before I entered this program. And then it affected my performance so badly in the initial week. And because it was a low residence program, I wasn't able to complete coursework, and I was given a deferment. But the way that when I told them what was going on, the director's response was less than, I would say, ethically optimal. Okay, because my point of view was, yeah, I'm already working 2 jobs to support myself, and I'm in this situation because I need to make sure that my health and safety uh, are taken care of, and then I can focus on your program. He didn't see it that way. He thought that my priority should have been my program, and had sort of a minimizing attitude towards what had happened to me. And I looked at that, and then I thought, oh, well, fuck this. I mean, I've already written a novel, and all these other people were here to learn how to do what I'd already done. So I thought, why would I pay you $33,000 to teach me to do what I just did? And so I dropped out of school and went back into reporting. I moved to the Virgin Islands. Um, and, I had already written my novel, The Visitors. And so that was what I was hoping the MFA program would help me with, was to launch and market that novel. That ended up being less of a priority. When life knocks you into a corner, like when you get gut punched into a corner, then when you come back up, you might not have the same priorities that you went down with. You know what I mean? So anyway, I was like dearly, dearly missing anything but this program. Like, I was like looking at my life going, I wish it was anywhere but here, which was weird because I really thought that was going to be the thing for me. But then I got there and I actually, even if the sexual assault hadn't happened, I had a number of like, I just felt like I was at summer camp. And I know that sounds really disdainful, but that's another reason why I love Ian's channel, because I think he's pretty spot on about some of this. So, in any rate, I went back into newspaper reporting because that's another thing that I did to support myself. And I really didn't focus on publishing until I had come back from. I spent 2 years in the Virgin Islands because I was hired by the Virgin Islands Daily News to be a reporter in 2013. That was I guess I tried to go to the MFA program in 2012. And I'm really grateful for the catastrophe that happened. Like, I don't, I'm really, it sounds like really weird, but being sexually assaulted, the silver lining was it made me take a step back and reevaluate. Do I want to even live in this area? Do I want to do this with my life? What is my social support network? Why is this? Just a lot of things happened, and I reevaluated, and I made a move, I made a change. So, basically, this is the history of me as a writer. From the ages of 11 to 18, I came up with all of the stories that I want to write, and novels too. But the thing about it is as I grew up, I thought I had a certain number of novels in me and then a certain number of stories, but it turns out that, for example, The Visitors, I thought The Visitors was a short story. I did try to write it as a short story when I was in high school and then left it and then picked it up later and it was a novel. It became a novel. I thought it would be a novella. It's a short novel. It's a lot shorter than the one that I've been working on for the last few years. So we're not working on, rather, working, not working. So I thought all of these stories, if I live the rest of my life, I have plenty of material. I have plenty of ideas. I have written poetry that has come to me as an adult. There are certain cycles of poetry that I conceived of after the age of 18, but pretty much everything came to me in these very generative years of adolescence. So I've always just seen it as my task to manage my life such that I have a way to support myself, but time and freedom to create on the side, which it frustrates and befuddles some people because they are not writers and they don't really understand the metrics and what we're up against in terms of the markets. And so, because I had been a newspaper reporter, that's another thing we'll talk about. So I went to college. I had all these stories. Okay. I tend to see my writing as like, I don't know where the stories come from. I know that people can say, oh, they come from your psyche. I get that. I understand. But the stories are there, they exist. I feel towards them that they're like certain energies and they're entities that I'm responsible for. And I have to manage them, I have to create them, I have to give them a place in the world. And then, once I've done that, then my life's mission maybe will be complete. At least as far as being an artist goes. I think there's a lot more to me than that, but as far as the art goes, that's how I see them. That's how I feel about the works. They are there, out in the ether. I am responsible for being the vessel, channeling them through. Then they are going to have a life beyond me, and that's my role. Okay, so then go to college, study literature, tried to study psychology, and then became I did freelance work for newspapers and magazines. And I was married to a writer. That's another part of this story. I was married to a guy who was a newspaper editor, and then, but his ambition was to become a conservative political pundit, which he did towards the end of our marriage. And I would say that a lot of the changes that were wrought from his succeeding as a writer, a lot of the personality changes or worsenings, I guess, the success, the fame being fully validated by National Review. That's where he ended up at in the last year of our marriage. That really was kind of like the nail in the coffin for our marriage, because I was happy to see him succeed as a partner, but I was not all about that, and I was not pleased to be dealing with someone. I was just not pleased. I'll put it to you that way. And then that became another part of my writer's story, because although we divorced and ultimately we dated for months twice. We dated for 4 months 2 times, because he had a tendency to call me up at a certain time of year, like February, March, and then pick me up. And then, like, it was weird, because I don't think he realizes this, but 2 times, 2 years in a row, he did this. And then he dumped me 2 years in a row the week of fireworks. So, July. I know, that's how I know the time period. So, because it happened eerily enough to that he had dumped me, and then there would be fireworks. So the fireworks in my town in Connecticut were not on July 4th. They were like starting a week prior, I think, or yeah. So at any rate, and then I moved to the Virgin Islands, and that was pretty much that. But he continued to go on to write books and have this successful career as a writer, and that sort of became like a skeleton in my closet, because I can't, I just sort of didn't know how to manage my existence and marketing as a writer, because my persona or my brand was something that I wanted to curate and manage and guard and reserve for myself a space to write about my life, including my life with Kevin and the breakup, if I so choose. But I also didn't want to be identified as his ex-wife, which is, I didn't know how to get around that. And so the pen name became a part of my strategy. And then he went and inflamed people so badly. And then I had a response, and I finally outed myself. So that was another thing. And then for various reasons, the pen name served me well. I've had jobs. It's not true. You can't be telling just everybody that they won't get in trouble at work. That's not true, Ian. So for example, I wrote my novel, The Visitors, when I was working as a personal trainer. I worked as a personal trainer in between stints as a newspaper reporter. So in 2008 and 2009, I was a newspaper reporter. I covered the crime beat for a daily in Connecticut called The Hour in Norwalk. Then I was laid off and became a personal trainer. And it was then that I wrote The Visitors. Then I tried to go to grad school, failed. miserably at that because of essay, and then went to work in 2013 for the Virgin Islands Daily News. Now, this is something interesting. If you Google my real name, Amanda Norris, and Virgin Islands Daily News, you're not going to come up with any of my clips, because after I left the paper's ownership changed. They changed the vendor for their archives, and in the switchover, technological changeover, a bunch of people's work got lost. So now, in order to find my articles, would have to teach myself how to use the Wayback Machine. And this is kind of my point about publishing. We are basically always chasing popularity on platforms and websites that we have to then calculate the lifespan of. And it sort of becomes like you're like trying to chase down. It's like trying to throw your arms around a ghost. I mean, I don't know. It's just pixels. It's just, I realized that because the newspaper industry collapsed while I was inside of it. Okay. So in 2008 and 2009, at the start of the recession, the newspaper industry was already collapsing. And then because certain local news outlets that were dominant in print and took their revenue from like classified ads couldn't cope fast enough with the changeover to the internet. Craigslist was killing the newspapers. Literally, that's what was happening. And people like me who had just entered the job market were scrambling. So, then they were telling us you need to do multimedia, you need to get good at video, and I was like, I'm a writer. This is what I do. I mean, you have photographers, and now I have to be everything. So if you're a millennial, the I must wear all the hats complex and syndrome, I don't know. Tell me in the comments if you have it too about your profession or whatever, but I am tired of it. Okay. So when I watched what was going on with the newspapers, later as I entered the literary market, I was leery, and I've not sufficiently found a way to deal with that. So what I mean by that is I came back to the States after working for the Virgin Islands Daily News. I put myself in graduate school for international relations, which I very much enjoyed. And one of my main regrets in life is not completing that degree. But, it has nothing, people can say it has nothing to do with writing, but everything has to do with writing. And writing has to do with everything. So, bottom line is, it was like, if I was going to go to grad school for something, it was going to be for something that I didn't already know. And I started studying international relations at American University in an online program in 2015. And then I was really embarrassed by the fact that somebody had allowed me to be a reporter, and I hadn't learned all this stuff. And now I guess you could say I am the epitome of the phrase, a little bit of education is a dangerous thing. So, yeah, but I have in myself, I have a major problem completing academic programs, because again and again this happened to me as an undergraduate. Well, when I study something, I really study it. I've always made straight A's. I'm a very motivated student. I'm a very driven student. I'm a very perfectionistic student. And what it feels like to me has happened throughout my life is that when I'm involved in an academic course of study, I pursue it with a certain zeal that's like right brained. I guess which one is the right brain or left brain? I never can remember. I think left brain is the creative one. The right brain is more like the logic one. So I put that to work, and then it's almost like this imbalance occurs where I've been working so hard from that sphere of my brain that the other sphere starts to become overactive and take over. And again and again and again, I've had these very disruptive, what looks from the outside like a nervous effing breakdown, where I will no longer be able to complete the study. I will immediately turn. So, like last time in the IR program, I was in a semester where I was taking something of class about the causes of war and then international economics, the international economics was fine. I could have dealt with that. But once we started reading Clausewitz and Sun Tzu or whatever, my brain demanded that I start researching the history of the lost colony at Roanoke and write and return to a cycle of poetry about it that I started in college. And I was like, I can't. I'm working full time. I've in in school full time. I just couldn't deal. And so that's what happens. And then, I mean, it will get so bad that I would just be completely dysfunctional as a student for a matter of weeks. I can recover, but it gets so bad. I can't sleep. I become very weird, dissociative almost. Like, I can't. And then I just said to myself at that time, I said, what am I doing with my life? I'm entering into even more debt. It's a long shot for me to have a career. And now, every time I hear the word career, I shudder because I've never wanted a career outside of writing. So then it gives writers and creatives a major imposter syndrome to be in these environments because everybody else is there busting their asses. I mean, at AU in my program, I was a cocktail waitress when I started. Yeah. I left the paper to go be a cocktail waitress because it made more money and it was easier and that took less time. So there I am. I'm in a program. I show up in class and they're 70% military, former military, other students. I mean, like lieutenants, lieutenant colonels, generals, people in the executive food chain at Walmart, people who work for the National Nuclear Safety Administration. I mean, people with major like corner offices, business cards. And I was like, I'm a cocktail waitress at the Marriott. And then I would even ask like rude questions like, is the military paying for you to do this? I don't know. What's going on? People were just like, so I found that I couldn't keep up. Again, not unexpected. I went to 4 different undergraduate colleges. And then at the end of this little breakdown, I just was like, what? You have this manuscript. You wrote this book years ago, because I wrote the book in 2011, The Visitors, and then didn't know what to do with it. And in 2015, after a year of grad school and full-time work, and once again being in that state of like complete collapse from just the overwork, I decided, okay, enough. And that was the year that I pivoted towards full-time working on getting my works published. So I sat down and I looked at the visitors. I dropped out of grad school and I said, what is it going to take to get this novel published? And then I started looking at the state of the literary markets. I started looking at who was publishing what. And from having had at certain points in my life, sales jobs like telemarketing, if you've ever done telemarketing or a sales job, or you've had to build up a roster of clients for yourself or whatnot, then something that you probably learned is that sales are a numbers game. So the more calls you make, the more pitches you make, then the more responses you get, and out of that, statistically, the more sales. And so I sat down and, with a very strategic, cold blooded mind, decided that I was going to get published. And I was like, but I had to have a conversation with myself first. I had to say, I am good enough. This is good. I'm, and by God, I deserve this. This is as good as this, and this is what's going to happen. And that's what I did. And then I ended up getting published in the journals of the Seattle Review, the Potomac, Adana. I don't even remember now, like a bunch of different journals. And it wasn't because I knew people. Sometimes in Philly, I have a friend in the scene, like I know, and sometimes people would ask me to submit stuff, but mostly it was numbers. Mostly it meant me coming home from working in a hotel or a restaurant and sitting there for 8 to 10 hours of a day on a day off, and doing submission and query and submission and query and submission and query, and creating an Excel spreadsheet and tracking and making sure I didn't double submit and looking at the rules and da 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 da. And it was a lot of bloody work, and it wasn't fun, and it wasn't inspiring, and it didn't help me like feel more creative. But that's what it took. And then once I had those, then I was like, now I'm going to get the novel published. And because I have a little bit of a CV, I have a little bit of a around my name. And I even had at one point the novel The Visitors got accepted by this place called Propertius Press. It was a small press, I think in North Carolina. And I lost an entire year. I lost an entire year because they accepted the manuscript, and then they went and folded, and they went out of business, and nobody told me that this was happening. So I kept emailing them, when are we going to talk about like editing, design, da 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 da. And I wasn't getting a response. And then it took me forever to figure out, like, the people who did this, who accepted my manuscript, just didn't bother to notify me. So I could have been submitting the entire time. And then finally in 2017, I found Scarlet Leaf Press. I found my publisher, she accepted it. And then 2 months later, I got an email from her saying that she had had a heart attack and needed to pull my novel from distribution because she was trying to reduce her workload. And wow, I just snapped at that point. I mean, there's other videos about it, but I just snapped. I was like, so the bottom line is this. After all of that happened, okay, and I never did a launch party or any marketing really around the visitors, in part because my stepmother died the same week. So it was just a bad year. Um, And then ever since then, I just was like done. I mean, I haven't submitted poetry, and I would sometimes write things, post it to Medium. I was getting interested in Instagram poetry, and publishing my own poetry on my own social media, when I came across a job opportunity to work um, as a call monitor for the Pennsylvania prison system. And I knew enough about the criminal justice system that I knew that I couldn't be running the risk of having any kind of online persona. So I killed all my social media. And I'm also a very like political person. I'm very aware of things like who is owning what, and I don't like what's going on. So I've been very, very loath to market myself for more than 5 years now. But what occurred to me in thinking recently about leaving the country and getting my second novel out there, what occurred to me was that, oh yeah, and I wrote a book about mass shooters, and then I took everything that I had written on Medium that I like, or that had been published already, and I compiled it into an autobiographical collection of essays. It's called Trainwreck, but I'm going to republish it under the title No Safe Words. So, in you know, you can see how writers have a lot of um, hurdles to face in terms of persona, identity, and marketing. And the hurdles for me have been watching the collapse of the newspaper industry and wondering, oh my God, if this happens to my creative work, what am I going to do? So that's why I was so incredibly grateful to see someone with Ian's outlook and energy on YouTube, because I basically live on YouTube as a millennial. I absolutely loathe social media platforms, and don't have intentions to do X, Insta, or Facebook. Have done Facebook before because they told me I had to. All the marketing books for the ones that I read prior to Roxana publishing The Visitors, said you have to. And then I tried, and I'm terrible at it. I'm just absolutely terrible at managing social media and marketing. But when I watch Ian's channel and when I listen to what he has to say, which I'm going to make a series of videos, okay? But because I need to make a video about what was going on with women in publishing in the time that I was at the MFA. Women in God, I call it the small book, small book, little women phenomenon. Anyway, I couldn't fathom. I didn't think I emotionally could handle watching, for instance, the literary journals that were online that published my work, that became something for me to stand on and claim credit for, fold, and then it's evaporated. Do you see what I'm saying? So today I'm going to tell you, I don't have a lot of words of wisdom for you, but what we're doing here with the literary renaissance is important because it's going to take us forming a market for ourselves, and then that market percolating up into the mainstream culture, because otherwise we're absolutely dead-ended. So let me tell you, I had zero desire to see my mass shooter book get shopped around and rejected. I knew that no one would publish it, so I self-published it in order to have my say and put my thoughts on the record. That's a bit of a non sequitur for me, that whole thing. And I do have regrets about the book. I look back at it now and I see that there are certain chapters that are exceptionally poorly written, and I need to redo that, but it's not really priority right now. Okay. Um, but self-publishing, I've had people say to me, friends of mine whom I really respect and who are extremely well read and brilliant people. Like, I have this friend, Chris, and he says, do you even ever read anything that's self-published? And at the time I was like, no. But I knew that it's the way. It's the way of the future. It's the way of now. May not be the way of the future, but it is the way of now. Because I can tell you, I have no desire, none, to play the game of traditional publishing. It's not that I see a lot of people on YouTube expressing a lot of like the death of literature and just being extremely revolted with what they're seeing come out. And but it's sort of like, look, I know from watching the political presses, like, I know from trying to be a journalist, trying to be a freelance journalist, like, I used to want to work for The Atlantic. I used to want to write for The Atlantic or Mother Jones, or I just think ProPublica would be like a crowning achievement. But I don't want to have to appeal anymore to what I see as a very narrow, very classist, very elitist set of New York intellectuals, the intelligentsia. Okay? I'm done. They will never, I will, it, I'm not, I can't, no. And furthermore, I can't help but kind of like, you know, at all of the criticism that's being leveled at the publishing houses, because it's probably very well deserved. We are tired of trying to sort of, if you're a writer, I don't know about you, but I am tired of trying to walk this line where people want to know, is my work going to be marketable or commercial, and yet is it, or conversely, is it going to be so avant-garde, and there was no middle way. And it was at this, looking at this and thinking about this, and also just having to get up and go to work every day. So I was just like, I don't think about it. The only thing I can think about is the work. And then Ian comes back around, enters into my feed, and is like, oh no, sweetheart, you cannot be doing that. You cannot afford to do that. So Ian is like, my parasocial relationship with him is like, he is the personal trainer I never had. He is the person lighting the fire under my ass. And I call him like bitter medicine, because I look at him, I'm like, how the fuck? You're so arrogant. Like, how can you be like that? But he's telling me how I need to be. Like, no, there's no reason for you to sit here and assume that any goddamn body should care about what you have to say, so much less pick up a book and spin out. Nobody cares. If you can't make a compelling case as to who you are in the world and why someone should listen to you, why in the fuck would they, with all this noise, with all this distraction, why in the fuck would they sit still and look at your analog creation for hours and hours and hours? Right? And so I realized from watching Ian and listening to Ian that I had been holding myself back. And part of why I'd been holding myself back was I didn't want to enter into a phase in my life where I'm perceived to be competing with my ex-husband. But here we are. So I'm going to make a much more concerted effort to routinely produce content on YouTube and Substack. I'm going to be in the spirit of trying to preserve my works, reading old works that were published on camera. I don't know why it's taking me this long to come up with this strategy, but I guess it's the shyness and the reservations about being on social media and being a person who uses social media, a person who actively wants an audience. Well, I guess we can't afford to have those reservations. according to Ian, if we're going to be doing this, we're going to be doing this. So I then, the thing is, I did make the right choice in creating a pen name for myself because the other day I Googled my real name and I do it now. I can open a tab, right? And oh no, that's not right. I can open a tab. If I just Google my real name, and I like this for security purposes. But if I just Google my real name, director of the Open Notes Lab, another author. It's an extremely common name. Okay, just a doctor, I'm redhead in Colorado. Yeah. So if I Google my pen name, then you immediately get me. You get my stuff. And you also get the trolls. The trolling is still the first in the SEO. It's still right up there. Train wreck letter from an ex-wife. That goes up and down. It depends, I guess, on how active Kevin's fans are and what I'm doing online, I guess. So today we are going to read The Limp. It's a poem I had published in Pedestal magazine. I'll put a link in the description. I want to read The Fairy Queen in full. That's that's on my reading to-do list. But this is a poem with an allusion to the Fairy Queen and a character in the Fairy Queen. All right, here we go. The Limp. I've always wanted a limp, to be the one who could not get away, who has to be rescued, the last-minute virgin, that 24-hour drugstore Christmas gift, cheap but sweet, politely brayed over. Because vulnerability always looks so much more charming from the outside, a snow globe in which the lawn is perpetually green, and the single little rooted farmhouse gleams like a tooth, with windows the color of a harvest moon, and the people inside miraculously composed, eating their supper despite being turned upside down and shaken, despite the maelstrom outside their painted shelter. Now there is a crick in my gate, something like the moment when the starling, depressed by wind, drops an octave in flight. I imagine fair Florimel in the woods, hands and neck lacerated by bracken, pursued by foul forester, hag's beast, fishermen and gods alike, and I imagine her limping off stage into this world, into my mirror. As the catch and tear in my hip socket widen, and as every step becomes a buckle and recovery, I'm forced to reckon with my false notions of what is poignant and sexy, as that braggadocio may eventually realize that the trusty, goodly, peerlessly beautiful maiden atop his steed is held together by packed snow and baling wire. Okay, so this poem, I wrote it after I was becoming a personal trainer, and I was doing a lot of long distance running, and I've had an injury in my hip since I was 14, and I got it in dance class, and I reactivated it with like a very intense 9-mile run, and had a limp for a few days and was startled. And so I started thinking about vulnerability and limping. And there is a character in the Fairy Queen. Leitmotif is there are these there's a woman and like an evil sorceress type or sorcerer can make kind of a clone. All right. And so there's a sort of a changeling aspect. So there's a character and then there's her evil clone. It's a trick. So I put that in the poem and started thinking about why is it such a dilemma for women to be why does vulnerability make us appear sexier, right? I mean, I came of age during the 90s when people were pretty damn anorexic, right? Callista Flockhart, what was it, the Friends chick, Courtney Cox? Just these insanely wiggy, thin women, okay? So I was thinking about things like that. And then I just think this is so perfect because I didn't plan for this to be, but that's what I call Ian braggadocio. It's like, yeah. But my point to you now is see, now that I've read it on camera, it's here in another form. That kind of puts my mind at ease. So that's what I'm going to be doing in this series of readings. Thank you, Ian. Let's get this show on the road.